A dog was kidnapped by a thief, but what his brave friend did next left everyone speechless. In the quiet suburb of Riverside, California, where palm trees lined the streets and morning fog rolled in from the mountains, lived two dogs who were the talk of the neighborhood. Max, a 3-year-old German Shepherd, belonged to the Anderson family, while his best friend Cooper, a 4-year-old Golden Retriever, lived next door with elderly couple Tom and Martha Williams. Sarah Anderson, a third-grade teacher, often joked that the wooden fence between their yards was merely a suggestion. The dogs had worn a path between their houses thanks to the pet doors both families had installed. It wasn't uncommon to find Max sprawled on the Williams' porch in the afternoon sun, or Cooper curled up in the Andersons' living room during movie nights. Those two are more like brothers and neighbors, Tom would say, watching the dogs play chase in their shared backyard space. At 68, he took particular joy in seeing Cooper's friendship with Max, as it kept his own dog young at heart. The dog's routine was clockwork perfect. Every morning, they would wait by their respective doors until Sarah left for school with her 10-year-old son, Jake, and Tom headed out for his morning walk. The moment their humans were gone, the real fun would begin. Their private patrol of both yards, checking for squirrels, suspicious leaves, or any other potential threats to their domain. Martha, who spent most of her time tending to her prized rose garden, always kept treats for both dogs in her pocket. You'd think they could tell time. She'd laugh as both dogs appeared precisely at 10 a.m. for their mid-morning snack. The neighborhood kids knew them well, too. The dynamic duo, they called them, often stopping by the fence after school to offer pets and receive enthusiastic kisses in return. Max, with his alert ears and dignified bearing, was a protective one, while Cooper's perpetually wagging tail and goofy grin made him the neighborhood clown. But their bond went deeper than just playtime companions. One winter night, when Martha had fallen in her garden, it was Max who heard her call for help and barked until Sarah came running. When a thunderstorm had terrified Jake during a power outage, Cooper had appeared as if by magic, pressing against the boy until his fear subsided. They're not just pets, Jake would tell his friends proudly. They're superheroes in disguise. Life had fallen into a comfortable pattern for both families and their 4-legged members. Sarah had recently started dating again, meeting a kind-hearted veterinarian named David, who quickly won over both Jake, and Max, Tom, and Martha celebrated their 45th wedding anniversary, with both dogs sporting bow ties for the backyard party. However, none of them could have predicted how their peaceful world would be shattered one autumn morning, or how their bonds of friendship would be tested in ways they never imagined. The trouble began with reports in the local news, a series of dog thefts in neighboring communities. Purebred dogs were disappearing from yards and homes, leaving their families devastated. Sarah and the Williams were disgusted over the fence, agreeing to be more vigilant, but none of them truly believed it could happen in their close-knit neighborhood. "We should be careful, though," Sarah had said, watching Max and Cooper chase each other through the sprinkler. "These thieves seem to be targeting expensive breeds. Who dare try anything with our boys?" Tom had replied confidently, not knowing how prophetic those words would prove to be. The last normal day started like any other. The morning fog had just begun to lift, and the scent of Martha's roses filled the air. Max and Cooper were engaging in their usual post-breakfast game of tug-of-war with their favorite rope toy. None of them noticed a white van that drove slowly past their houses 3 times that morning, or the man who seemed particularly interested in photographing Martha's garden with his phone. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, no one could have guessed that by nightfall, their world would be turned upside down, and a remarkable tale of loyalty and courage would begin to unfold. That afternoon, Martha had a doctor's appointment, and Tom drove her into the city. Sarah was teaching late due to parent-teacher conferences, and Jake was at his after-school coding club. It was during this brief window of time, when both houses were empty, that the white van returned. Cooper was dozing in his favorite spot under the shade of Martha's prized rose bushes when he heard the distinct crunch of unfamiliar footsteps on the gravel path. Max, who had been inside the Andersons' house, immediately sensed something was wrong. Through the pet door window, he watched as 2 men in work uniforms approach Cooper, carrying what looked like maintenance tools. "Hey there, buddy," one of them called out with fake cheerfulness, holding out what appeared to be a treat. Cooper, despite his friendly nature, felt uneasy. He backed away slowly, but the men had already positioned themselves to block his escape routes. Max's protective instincts kicked in. He burst through his pet door, charging across the yard with a warning bark that echoed through the neighborhood. But the thieves were prepared. As Max approached, one of them sprayed something in his face that made him stumble and cough. Cooper, seeing his friend in distress, lunged at the man who had sprayed Max. In the chaos that followed, Max managed to clamp his jaws onto one thief's pant leg, tearing the fabric and drawing blood. His friend's terrified yelps drove him to make one last desperate attempt, but the effects of the spray had weakened him too much. The last thing he saw was Cooper's frightened eyes before the van doors slammed shut. Miss Rodriguez, who lived across the street, had heard the commotion and rushed to her window just in time to see the van speed away. She immediately called 911 and then tried to reach both families, but only got their voicemails. When Sarah pulled into her driveway 30 minutes later, she found Max still trying to recover from the spray, pacing anxiously between the 2 yards. The police were already there, taking Mrs. Rodriguez's statement. They're professionals, Officer Chin explained, making notes in his pad. We've seen similar cases across 3 counties. They target purebred dogs, especially friendly ones like golden retrievers. They're usually sold to unauthorized breeders or shipped out of state. Tom and Martha arrived home to their worst nightmare. Martha collapsed into a patio chair, while Tom's hands shook as he provided Cooper's information to the police. Sarah hugged Jake, who had begun to cry when he heard the news. But no one was taking it harder than Max. He refused to eat or rest, constantly moving between Cooper's favorite spots, whining softly. When night fell, he positioned himself at the front of the Andersons' house, his eyes fixed on the street where the van had disappeared. He's not going to give up, is he? Jake asked his mother, watching Max's vigil from the window. Sarah wrapped an arm around her son. No, honey, he's not, Sarah whispered. Max and Cooper weren't just friends. They were family. What no one realized at that moment was that Max wasn't just mourning, he was planning. Years of playing in both yards had made him incredibly clever at finding ways around obstacles, and now he was going to put all of his intelligence and determination into finding his friend. As the neighborhood settled into an uneasy sleep that night, Max began his own investigation. His powerful nose had caught something crucial, a distinct scent from the thief's torn pant leg mixed with the metallic smell of the van's exhaust. It wasn't much, but for a dog with Max's abilities, it was enough to start with. The next 24 hours would prove to be an extraordinary testament to the lengths one friend would go to save another, reminding everyone that the bonds between dogs go far deeper than humans sometimes realize. The next morning dawned with a flurry of activity. We've already alerted local hospitals to watch for anyone seeking treatment for a dog bite on the leg, the police said. Max hadn't slept at all. His behavior had changed dramatically. Gone was a playful family pet, replaced by a focused, determined animal. He paid close attention to the police K-9 unit that came to investigate, watching as they worked to pick up scents. Sarah noticed something else, too. Max had started collecting Cooper's toys, gathering them in a corner of the Anderson garage. Among them was her shared rope toy, still carrying both their scents. He's processing it in his own way. David, Sarah's veterinarian boyfriend, explained when he stopped by to check on Max, dogs are more emotionally complex than most people realize. He's not just sad, he's actively trying to solve this problem. That afternoon, something changed. While the families were coordinating with local rescue groups, Max suddenly became alert. A delivery van had backfired a few blocks away, producing a distinctive sound similar to the thieves' van. Before anyone could react, Max bolted through his pet door and squeezed through a loose board in the fence, one that only he and Cooper knew about. "Come back," Jake shouted, but the German shepherd was already racing down the street, his nose to the ground. Sarah jumped into her car, following Max as he zigzagged through the neighborhood. He was clearly tracking something, stopping at intersections, doubling back occasionally, but always moving with purpose. "He's following their trail," Detective Martinez said over the phone when Sarah called to update her. "The exhaust smell from their van would have left a distinct path. Stay with him if you can, but don't interfere. Dogs can sometimes track better than K-9 units when they're personally motivated." Max led them to an industrial area about 3 miles from home. The scent trail ended at a seemingly abandoned warehouse where several tire tracks marked the gravel lot. Sarah called Detective Martinez immediately. While they waited for the police, Max circled the building, his behavior becoming increasingly agitated. He'd found something significant: fresh traces of Cooper's scent mixed with those of other dogs. This could be one of their temporary holding locations, Detective Martinez said when she arrived with backup. They usually move the dogs quickly to make tracking harder. Based on the tire tracks, they were here recently, possibly last night. As the police secured the area, Max discovered something crucial: a torn piece of fabric caught on a broken window, matching the pants the thief had shredded during the theft. His nose told him the blood was fresh. The injured thief had been here within the last few hours. Sarah watched her dog with growing admiration. He's not just looking for Cooper, she realized. He's actually investigating, putting the pieces together. The warehouse yielded important clues: empty crates, dog food receipts, and most importantly, security camera footage from a neighboring business showing the white van heading east toward the interstate. They're moving them out of state, Detective Martinez concluded. We've seen this pattern before. They usually head toward Arizona or Nevada, where they have connections with illegal breeding operations. Max's discovery had given them their first real lead, but Cooper had already been moved. As they drove home that evening, Max sat alertly in the back seat, his eyes scanning every vehicle they passed. Back in the neighborhood, Tom and Martha were waiting anxiously for news. When Sarah explained Max's detective work, Martha burst into tears. "That's my boy's best friend," she said proudly, reaching down to pat Max's head. "If anyone can find Cooper, it's Max." That night, instead of maintaining his vigil at the front of the house, Max did something different. He brought Cooper's favorite blanket to Sarah's bedroom and laid it at her feet. Then he went to Jake's room and nudged him awake. "Mom," Jake called out, "I think Max wants us to follow him." Sarah found Max in the garage, standing by her car keys. The message was clear. He wasn't done searching, and he needed their help. "What do you think, Jake?" Sarah asked, looking at her son. "Should we trust Max's instincts?" Jake nodded firmly. Cooper would do the same for him. None of them knew it yet, but Max's determination was about to lead them on an extraordinary journey that would test the limits of friendship, courage, and the special bond between humans and their four-legged family members. After consulting with Detective Martinez, Sarah made a bold decision. With Jake out of school for the weekend and David agreeing to join them, they would follow Max's lead. The detective provided them with a special tracking app connected to the police network, allowing them to report any sightings immediately. They set out at dawn, with Max in the back seat of Sarah's SUV, his nose constantly twitching at the partially open window. David followed in his veterinary van, equipped with medical supplies just in case. The raw determination in Max's eyes told them this wasn't just a wild goose chase. Head east on the interstate, Detective Martinez had advised. Our intelligence suggests they have a route through several small towns where they switch vehicles to avoid detection. Max's behavior changed dramatically when they reached a truck stop about 60 miles outside the city. He became extremely agitated, pawing at the window and whining. Sarah pulled over, and Max led them to a dumpster behind the building. "Look at this," David said, pulling out several discarded fast food bags. Mixed in were torn pieces of paper, registration documents for multiple dogs, partially shredded but still legible. "They stopped here to destroy evidence," Sarah murmured. But Max wasn't interested in the papers. He was focused on something else: a distinctive scent on a discarded leash. His reaction told them everything. Cooper had been here. The truck stop security cameras proved invaluable. The footage showed the white van arriving late the previous night, then leaving after 30 minutes. But more importantly, it showed the dogs being transferred to a different vehicle, a modified black SUV with tinted windows. That's why they're so hard to track, Sarah realized. They keep changing vehicles. They were about to return to their cars when Max suddenly tensed. A man had just limped out of the truck stop's convenience store, favoring his right leg. Even from a distance, they could see the bandage beneath his torn pants. Sarah quickly snapped photos while David called Detective Martinez. The man matched Mrs. Rodriguez's description of one of the thieves, and his injury aligned with Max's defensive attack. But before the police could arrive, the man spotted them, or more specifically, he spotted Max. His face paled, and he quickly hobbled to a waiting car. "Follow that car," Sarah shouted, jumping into her SUV. David was already moving in his van, maintaining enough distance to avoid suspicion. The chase led them through back roads and small towns, with Max growing increasingly animated in the back seat. His behavior suggested they were getting closer to Cooper. As the sun began to set, they found themselves in a remote area near the state border. The suspect's car turned onto a dirt road, leading to what appeared to be an old farmhouse. Several vehicles were parked behind the building, including the black SUV from the truck stop footage. "We found their hub," Sarah whispered into her phone, updating Detective Martinez. The detective advised him to stay back and wait for backup. They were dealing with an organized criminal operation, but Max had other plans. A familiar bark echoed from one of the outbuildings, and Max's ears perked up instantly. It was Cooper's distinctive voice, a sound both families would recognize anywhere. "Cooper's alive," Jake whispered, tears in his eyes. Max had found him. They watched as men moved between the buildings, loading crates into various vehicles. Through binoculars, David counted at least 15 dogs of different breeds, all destined for illegal sale. Detective Martinez and her team were still 40 minutes away, but when they saw two men preparing to load several crates into a trailer, including one containing a golden retriever that could only be Cooper, they realized they might not have that long to wait. Max looked at Sarah, then at the farmhouse. His entire body trembled with the effort of restraining himself. The question was clear in his eyes. What were they going to do? Sarah looked at her son, then at David, and finally at Max. Sometimes, she realized, doing the right thing meant taking risks, but they would need to be smart about it. "Okay," she said, pulling out her phone to document everything. "Here's what we're going to do." Sarah's plan was simple but risky. David would create a diversion with his veterinary van, pretending to have trouble near the farm's entrance. Meanwhile, she would call the local sheriff to report suspicious activity, buying more time for Detective Martinez to arrive. But the most crucial part of the plan depended on Max. "Jake, you stay in the car and lock the doors," Sarah instructed firmly. "If anything happens, call 911. She attached her phone to Max's collar, setting it to record video evidence they might need later. As David pulled his van onto the main road and headed toward the farm's entrance, Sarah quietly opened Max's door. "Find Cooper, boy," she whispered. "But be careful." Max moved like a shadow in the growing dusk, using years of backyard stealth practice to his advantage. He remembered every training session with Jake, every game of hide and seek that had taught him to move quietly. Now those skills had a vital purpose. David's diversion worked perfectly. His van sputtered to a stop right at the farm's entrance, and two of the thieves came out to investigate. Sorry, folks. They heard him call out cheerfully, "Having some engine trouble. Don't suppose you could help." While the men were distracted, Max crept closer to the outbuilding where they'd heard Cooper. The familiar scent grew stronger, mixed with the frightened smells of other dogs. Through gaps in the wooden walls, he could see several stacked crates. Cooper recognized Max's, sent immediately, and gave a soft whine. Max found a side door, its latch simple enough for a clever dog to nose open. Something he'd learned from breaking into the Williams garage countless times to steal Cooper's toys. Inside, the scene was heartbreaking. Crates lined the walls, containing various purebred dogs, a husky, 2 French bulldogs, a Bernese mountain dog, and several others. In a corner crate, Cooper lay curled up, looking scared but unharmed. Max went straight to Cooper's crate, but quickly realized he couldn't open the more complex latch. He needed human help. Returning to the door, he gave 2 short, quiet barks, the signal Sarah was waiting for. Sarah had been recording everything on her phone while simultaneously texting updates to Detective Martinez. When she heard Max's signal, she crept toward the building, keeping to the shadows. Meanwhile, David was performing an Oscar-worthy performance of a confused veterinarian with engine trouble, keeping the thieves occupied with increasingly complex questions about local mechanical services. Inside the building, Sarah worked quickly to open Cooper's crate, while Max stood guard the door. The moment Cooper was free, he pressed against her leg, trembling but relieved. Should we free the others? Jake had disobeyed orders and followed his mother, his young face determined. Before Sarah could answer, they heard shouts from outside. The thieves had spotted David's veterinary license plate and realized it couldn't be a coincidence. "Jake, get Cooper to our car now," Sarah commanded, already working to open the other crates. She couldn't bear to leave the other dog behind. Max positioned himself between the door and his family, ready to protect them. When one of the thieves burst in, Max was waiting. This time, there was no spray to stop him. His powerful bark and bared teeth sent the man scrambling backward, giving Sarah precious extra seconds to free more dogs. Outside, they could hear sirens approaching. Detective Martinez's team was almost there, but they weren't quite fast enough. 2 more men appeared at the door, one holding a catch pole. Sarah had managed to free most of the dogs, but they were now trapped inside. The freed dogs huddled behind Max, who stood his ground, hackles raised. Just then, Cooper did something unexpected. Instead of running to safety with Jake, he returned to stand beside his best friend. Together, the 2 dogs faced the thieves, their combined growls echoing through the building. The thieves hesitated, faced with 2 large, angry dogs protecting their human family. That moment of hesitation was all they needed. Detective Martinez's cars came screaming up the driveway, lights flashing, and the local sheriff's department arrived from the other direction. "Police, don't move." The next few minutes were chaos as officers swarmed the property. The thieves were arrested, and animal control arrived to help with the rescued dogs. Sarah hugged Jake tightly, watching as Max and Cooper did their own celebration dance, tails wagging furiously. Detective Martinez approached them, shaking her head in amazement. "I don't know whether to congratulate you or scold you for taking such a risk," Detective Martinez said. "But thanks to you and Max's determination, we just broke up one of the largest dog trafficking rings in the state." Tom and Martha, who had been updated throughout the journey, were waiting tearfully when they finally arrived home late that night. Cooper bounded into Martha's arms, while Tom knelt down to hug both dogs. "Our boys," he said proudly, his voice thick with emotion. "Our brave, brilliant boys." In the weeks following the rescue, life gradually returned to normal in Riverside, though things would never be quite the same. The story of Max's determination and Cooper's rescue made local headlines, with the neighborhood dubbing them the heroes of Highland Street. The bust at the farmhouse had led to the arrest of 12 people involved in a multi-state dog trafficking operation. Thanks to Sarah's video evidence and the documentation they gathered, prosecutors had a solid case. Even better, all the rescued dogs were reunited with their families or placed in loving homes. Detective Martinez made a special visit to present Max with an honorary K-9 unit badge, which Sarah proudly displayed next to his regular collar. "We've actually started working with animal behaviorists," the detective explained, "to develop better ways to use family dogs in tracking these kinds of cases. Max showed us it could be done." Cooper, while physically unharmed, had become more cautious around strangers, but Max's presence helped him recover his confidence. Their bond had grown even stronger, if that was possible. Now, Cooper rarely left Max's side during their backyard adventures, and Max seemed perfectly content with this arrangement. The Williams made some changes too. Tom installed security cameras around their property, and Martha joined a neighborhood watch program. "Never thought I'd become a crime prevention activist at 68, she joked. "But here we are, posting about suspicious vehicles on our community app." Sarah's relationship with David deepened through the experience. He'd shown tremendous courage during the rescue, and his care for both dogs afterward had proven his character. Jake especially appreciated how David taught him to check Cooper for any lingering anxiety signs and helped him understand how to make his furry friend feel safe again. One sunny Saturday morning, about a month after the rescue, the Andersons and Williams decided to celebrate. They removed a section of the fence between their yards, replacing it with a secure gate. "No more squeezing through loose boards," Sarah laughed, watching Max and Cooper race back and forth between the newly connected spaces. The celebration turned into an impromptu block party, as neighbors stopped by with treats for both dogs. Miss Rodriguez brought her famous empanadas, and other neighbors contributed to what became a potluck feast. The dogs received plenty of scratches, treats, and admiration. During the party, Jake sat between Max and Cooper on the grass, one arm around each dog. "You know what, Mom?" he said thoughtfully. "I used to think superheroes only existed in movies and comics, but now I know better. Sometimes they have 4 legs and fur." Tom nodded in agreement. "And sometimes the greatest superpower isn't strength or speed," he added, "but loyalty and love." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across both yards, the families gathered on the Williams patio. Cooper lay with his head on Martha's lap, while Max sat alertly nearby, still maintaining his protective watch, even in these peaceful moments. "Look at them," Sarah said softly. "After everything that happened, they're still just 2 best friends who happen to live next door to each other." "More than that," David corrected, smiling. "They're family. All of us." That night, as the stars came out over Riverside, Max and Cooper could be found in their favorite spot, the space between their 2 homes, now officially connected by the new gate. They lay side by side, Cooper occasionally rolling over for a belly rub from his best friend. Max was always happy to oblige. The neighborhood settled into its nighttime routine, but things were different now. People looked out for each other more, kept a closer eye on their pets, and appreciated the deep bonds that connected them all. And at the center of it all were 2 dogs who had shown everyone the true meaning of friendship and courage. As Martha often said, watching the 2 dogs from her kitchen window, some things in life can't be explained, like how a German shepherd and a golden retriever became brothers, or how their love for each other made all of us better people. Jake had the last word on the matter in his school essay titled My Heroes. He wrote, "Some people say dogs are just animals, but they're wrong. Dogs like Max and Cooper teach us what it means to be truly human, to love unconditionally, to be brave when we're scared, and to never give up on family. And sometimes, the best families are the ones we choose for ourselves."